Fire Emblem Three Houses is a game I have very complicated feelings for. In all honesty, I haven't played the game in 3 years for a variety of reasons that make me dislike the game. However, despite playing up my role as a Three Houses hater, it comes from a place of love for the game. If you guys didn't know this, my very first proper challenge run on this channel isn't the Shadows of Valentia one from a year ago, nor is it my monotype engage runs. It was actually a run of Three Houses where I soloed the game with Ferdinand. I loved the game when it released, and some part of me still loves the game. Mostly when talking about my AUs for this game. And the Yuri I write. I will not hide the sins of my AO3. So, why am I here with Three Houses content after 3 years? Well, when one of my friends played the game back in 2019, he apparently soft-locked his game. Like, he told me he made it to the Holy Tomb, and just couldn't beat the chapter, and some part of me was in disbelief. Now, I can understand thinking you've soft-locked yourself in a Fire Emblem game. That happened to me back when I first played Awakening in 2014. I will live up to the fact that I used to suck at Fire Emblem, and in some ways, I probably still do. However, now that I know how to play the games, if I could recover that old file, I think I could beat it. I would judge my past decisions to no end, but I could probably beat the game. But back to my friend's soft-locked game. Due to me being way too knowledgeable about Three Houses at the time, along with a budding interest in doing Fire Emblem challenge runs, my friend gave me a set of rules to play the game with him. And this has been a running joke between us for 5 years now. So what are these rules? How is it that my friend played the game? Well, according to him, I had to play on Hard Classic, play as male Byleth, choose the Blue Lions, not do any skirmishes, and students had to decide their own goals. Now, this isn't exactly the best way to play the game, but it should be just fine. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, or maybe my friend didn't account for me needing an extensive set of rules. The only way to find out is by starting up the game, choosing our difficulty, and giving ourselves the best name. So, can some guy beat Fire Emblem Three Houses when playing like my friend did? Our first map is a pretty normal tutorial, and I realize that most people probably use all the units casually. I'll be honest and say that I didn't, so there's probably a good chance I've already diverged from playing exactly as my friend did. However, after having played through this game more times than I'd like to admit, I've learned to only really use Byleth and whichever house leader I plan to teach. Doing so prevents you from wasting experience, thus allowing you to get at least one level on both Byleth and your house leader. Not to mention, I like stealing items from the other house leaders for free vulneraries and weapons. Good stuff to either give to my future students or sell for a bit of gold. Anyways, the tutorial is easy to beat before we're taken to the monastery and made a teacher out of the blue. And speaking of blue, we choose to teach the Blue Lions as per the rules. After this, the game informs me of all the DLC I have available to pick up. I didn't mention this in the rules, but I have chosen to add a rule of my own, that being not to use DLC. I say this as, first of all, I don't think my friend bought the DLC, and second of all, he played before any of the major free updates or DLC releases as far as I'm aware, which means I'll try to only use mechanics available in the initial release of the game. This means ignoring the DLC items I can collect from my bed and all the blue DLC quests available. However, I will also admit to running around in one of Violet's DLC costumes. I'm addressing this now as it's obviously using DLC, but this is entirely cosmetic and thus does not change the overall experience. The same can be said for students existing in their monastery outfits in battle once they change classes. I remember this being a feature added in one of the updates, but it's once again purely cosmetic, so it has no effect on the gameplay. As for what we do in the monastery, we learn about gardening, fishing, and meals. These are the most important things for this run, Because, spoiler alert, we're spending most of this challenge in the monastery. Moving on to our first proper map, we play as normal. The students I chose to bring along are Dedue, Felix, and Ash. Dedue and Felix come along because they're some of the most broken characters in the game. And Ash is here because I care him. Again, not much to say here because this chapter is made to introduce you to your students' builds. As for Chapter 2, we're still being railroaded through tutorials, so we have no real control over what we can do. However, it's during this month when we first gain access to instruction. This happens every Monday, and is our way to combat our lack of control over student goals. For those who don't understand how student goals work, it's basically a way of telling students what skills they should improve every week. Students themselves will sometimes come to you with new goals they may wish to follow. From what I understand, each student has a set list of goals they are likely to request. These goals tend to follow at least one boon a student has, so they can work towards one of the classes they're intended to become. I also think they may be more likely to request following a certain goal of theirs if you've helped them make some progress in skills involved with that goal. I think the way these requested goals work is good to help lead a new player down an intended and pretty decent class path for a character. However, a student can still request a goal that is completely tangential to the path you may be going down with them. Some of the more obvious characters that like to do this are Petra and Ash, as they exist to fit in more than one niche. Petra being someone who works well as a swordmaster, assassin, or wyvern rider, and Ash being someone who can go sniper, wyvern rider, or maybe a warrior if you want. The real issue with not having control over student goals is that I can't easily make students learn skills for the express purpose of gaining abilities. The only effect I have are limited instruction points I gain every week to directly train students in skills. Once we've finished our first week of instruction, the game then tutorializes us on skirmishes. This is the first and last skirmish we'll do in this run, as it's mandatory. I probably don't need to explain this, but skirmishes are just extra little battles you can do to gain more experience on your units. Something I may have to explain, though, is that in Three Houses you're usually given the option of 2 different skirmishes. I've run into this before where people don't understand that there are differences between the 2 skirmishes the game will provide you with. The first difference between these is only applicable on normal mode, where one option will cost 0 activity points, while the other will always cost 1 activity point. This was presumably a decision made so that more casual players can do as much experience grinding as they please for the most comfortable gameplay experience. Higher difficulties, however, don't let you do battles for free. The only way to get around that is with the infinite month glitch, which, by the way, I won't be using. The second difference between the 2 skirmish options is that one is easier and the other is harder. The easier of these skirmishes will have the same suggested level as the month's mission, while the harder one will be a few levels higher. This gives the option to either have more difficult battles for better experience, or easier battles for less experience. I'm telling you all about these differences because when my friend initially told me about how difficult skirmishes were, he was unaware that they come with difficulty levels. This led to him avoiding skirmishes, thus forcing the anti-skirmish rule upon me. However, I think the game will be just fine without them. After all, other Fire Emblem games that have skirmishes tend to slightly push the player away from doing them on difficulties higher than normal. Whether it be through weird enemy stats, the equipment on them, or even the high cost of simply making a skirmish appear, you are incentivized to optimize how you play the story, or find a way to deal with whatever comes with skirmishes. The only outlier I'm aware of with this formula is maybe Sacred Stones. Don't quote me on that though, I've only played it once. Once we're finished with our month of tutorials, it's then time to begin our next story map. The Red Canyon is honestly another easy map to finish. Since we didn't get to use all our students in the last story map, the game still needs to act as though it's introducing us to our characters. Not to mention this map is also our tutorial on battalions. I do, however, choose not to split up my units like the game tries to get you to do. Instead, I keep my units together because Dedue is all-powerful, which is to say his personal skill gives him extra defense when he waits, which is so good for how I play these games. It allows me to lure enemies over with Dedue before obliterating them with my army on player phase. As for the commander, he serves as a good bit of experience for my ranged units thanks to his lack of movement and attack range. After a month of hanging out in the monastery, we move on to our next mission. I think it's something about quelling a rebellion, but it's hard to say when I can't see through all this fog. However, being the frugal idiot I am, I chose not to buy any torches. To my defense though, this is the only Fog of War map in the story, so torches aren't worth it. They also aren't worth it because the fog is super easy to deal with on this map. It's produced by a mage who's essentially standing right next to where your units start. Killing him deletes the fog, removing the entire challenge of this map. I guess there's a secondary challenge of keeping the green units alive in order to get a reward. However, one of those units is Catherine, who I have never seen die here. Oh, and speaking of secondary challenges, I also want to make clear that I gave myself 2 bonus challenges for this run. The first of these is to keep all of my units alive throughout this challenge. While I'm of the mindset that strategic deaths can be useful in Fire Emblem, I know my friend prefers keeping all his units alive. So it'd be in the spirit of this run to do the same and keep all my students alive. The second challenge is more of a personal preference, that being to avoid using Divine Pulse. I think it's a really cool quality of life feature, especially for newer players. Of course, it's also nice for advanced players when they make small mistakes that can snowball into something real bad. I'm simply not choosing to use Divine Pulse because I think Three Houses is already easy enough. Not using this feature actually forces me to think about what I'm doing. Back to the actual gameplay, this map is straightforward once the Dark Mage is gone. With the fog cleared, it's easy to see what the enemy is doing and thus work around them. And just like with the map before, it's easy to simply lure enemies with Dedue for my units to then finish off. The most annoying thing in this chapter is the green unit stealing my kills and thus my limited experience. I suppose Leonardo is also a bit of an issue, as our first commander with access to 2 ranged attacks. Not to mention, getting hit by his gambit can put you in a bit of a pickle. However, while Leonardo might have access to 2 ranged attacks, he starts with an Iron Lance equipped, making it safe to attack him from afar for 1 turn. Not to mention, it's easy to melt his health away with combat arts like Night Kneeler. But the true MVP here was Annette, showing up with Cutting Gale and stealing all the credit. As we move on to the next month of burning time in the monastery, I should probably explain my monastery process every month. Basically, my plan is always to cook a meal with Dedue at the start of the month to give useful stat buffs. I'll then have meals with students to help max out their motivation. Though this isn't just for the motivation, but also because meals are the best way to quickly up your professor rank. From there, I use any remaining activity points on faculty training. I also always do whatever fishing I can on the first free day of the month, much like how I cook with Dedue. Not to mention, I make sure to garden every week. The reason I mention this is because optimizing how you spend your time in the monastery is major in making the game easier to play. Failing to cook with someone means you're losing out on having better stats to help you with your battles this month. Failing to fish or garden means you're losing out on food to use for cooking or even potential stat boosters you can gain from gardening. Not to mention that all these activities I speak of, excluding faculty training, provide you with professor experience. By properly choosing your activities, your professor experience snowballs because as you gain ranks, you then gain more activity points to spend that can provide you with more professor experience. Failing to optimize your time in the monastery won't kill you. However, it does mean you miss out on things that can make your life easier. The way I'm using the monastery is crafted from having played this game multiple times, and it's unlikely that a new player would do the same. And when the monastery is 90% of the game, it's very unlikely that I'm getting the proper experience of how my friend played. Moving on from the monastery, though, I suppose it's time to talk about our next story map. In all honesty, I think this was the hardest map this playthrough. This is perhaps in part because of how I split up my units. I ended up sending all my characters with high resistance to one side of the map, while a handful of others took on the other side. Were I smarter about this map, I'd have separated Mercedes and Annette as they're my two units with healing magic. By sending both of them to the right side of the map, this meant my other group had to rely upon vulneraries to survive. I was also put in somewhat precarious situations thanks to enemy gambits. I suppose I'm still quite used to playing Fates, so I was still failing to note enemies with battalions. However, I was able to work around this through the sheer power of my stupidity. And also remembering I had battalions of my own. Once I'd removed myself from the horrible situation I'd placed myself in, all that remained was the boss. A magical boss, which clearly meant using magic was the correct solution. And for beating this chapter, I get a cool new weapon that I will now ignore, because as cool as the Sword of the Creator is, it's kind of heavy, and I don't have the stats to offset that weight. As we once again enter the monastery phase, I then had a new problem to consider. See, I've been doing every non-DLC quest available to me, and I'd assumed my friend probably did as much. Or at least I hope so. But with that came the question of quest battles. Now, despite quest battles being very similar to skirmishes, they are separate from them. Not to mention the fact that quest battles are actually a lower level than skirmishes, which led me to a new question. Am I allowed to do quest battles? And thankfully, I was able to ask my friend about this. He was confused, but said he guessed they were allowed, so I guess I can complete them. I'm guessing his reaction is due to probably not doing quest battles, but also, he's the one providing me with the rules. I will do as I please and ask about things if I feel it necessary. So if I'm playing very differently than him, then this is just your lesson to give me in-depth rules for a challenge. This is also to say that I slightly fixed my levels this month. See, my characters were around the level 5 to 8 range, and the suggested level for this month's mission is 9, so I'm already falling behind on experience. By completing the 2 quest battles provided to me this month, I was able to make up for that missing experience. In fact, I got Felix to level 10, making him my first unit to gain their intermediate class. Of course, spending 2 weeks completing these battles means I lost out on 2 weeks of monastery usage. But it was well worth my time as the next story map went so much more smoothly than the last one. I am sadly quite lacking on the movement I'm used to having at this point though, as my units normally should be in their intermediate classes by now. In fact, I usually would have started getting intermediate classes 1 or 2 chapters ago, especially since I haven't recruited any units, which is to say, the no skirmish restriction is actually affecting me. However, I did say that the previous chapter was the hardest for me, and that wasn't a lie. At this point, I was getting back into the swing of things and remembered how best to handle this map. I essentially left Gilbert to die while I moved forward to clear a small area. From there, I could move back to take out the reinforcements before pushing forward again. Once I'd reached the top of the map, I would leave my units hanging out in the upper right corner. I didn't know the exact trigger for the reinforcements, but I knew they would show up here. By setting up my units nearby, I was able to destroy the enemy the moment they appeared. With a second set of reinforcements handled, I could then slowly make my way towards Miklon. He can easily be lured into a trap by Dedue, just like every other strength-based enemy in the game. However, this is a 2-phase boss, the second of which is his demonic beast form. Demonic beasts can be difficult to deal with if you don't know what you're doing. But since we're only dealing with one, this is super easy. I used the Stride Gambit first to give all my units an additional 5 movement. From there I could surround the demonic beast using gambits to delete all of its shields. With the shields gone, the beast would then be unable to attack until the next player phase. This made it safe and easy to go all out with my attacks, handling all 3 of its health bars with no issue. For completing this chapter, we then have a very important conversation with Rhea. See, she'll request we hand her the Lance of Ruin. Now, as a hero's relic, it's a powerful weapon that could be of use to me, which is why I refuse to hand it over to her. Rhea hates it when you do this, but you'll keep the Lance if Sylvain is in your class. This means the Lance of Ruin is always free to get this early in the game if you either are teaching the Blue Lions or are playing as female Byleth. There is, of course, a way to obtain it later in the game if you don't do this, and I didn't even know if I would use the lance. However, I still chose to keep it as, again, it's a powerful weapon that could get me out of dicey situations. After all, it's better safe than sorry. More importantly, we've got a new month, which means a new mission. This month's mission is special as you can start it during any free day of the month. Should you choose to do the mission as soon as possible, you'll get the White Dragon Scarf. It's an equipable item that raises your charm by 2. I don't care about this scarf, as I'd find it more useful to gain professor experience in the monastery. Plus, doing the mission immediately would prevent me from having control over weekly instruction. If I skip a few weeks, there's a good chance of it messing with how I'm crafting units and sending me off track. As such, I spent my weeks doing what I pleased in the monastery before finally deciding to go find Flayn. Now, with this chapter, you have 2 victory conditions. Either kill the Death Knight or kill everyone else on the map. This also comes with a time restriction of 25 turns. Since I'm somewhat low on levels though, I know that fighting the Death Knight isn't the smartest idea. However, this map splits into 2 parts, meaning I have to split my units if I want to do this map efficiently. As such, I sent Ingrid and Ashe off to take the winding path to the right. This is due to Ingrid now being a Pegasus Knight, thus having good movement compared to my other units. As for Ashe, he joins her to help handle the archers. Not to mention that having ranged attacks makes it easy for him to kill enemies in adjacent hallways. Everyone else is working together to handle the larger set of enemies that make up the rest of the map. With Dedue now in the Armored Knight class, he's much more effective at luring enemies, taking far less damage from attacks. Mercedes was of similar use, acting as a good magic tank thanks to her resistance. Thanks to proper team management and decent tactics, I was easily able to clear all the enemies from this map. In fact, I did so while also collecting all the treasure, with plenty of turns to spare. We then followed this up with Tournament Month. I kept up with my usual monastery activities. However, there was also a fishing tournament. Please don't ask how much time I spent fishing this month. It was a lot. Now, as for the Battle of the Eagle and Lion, it's honestly a free mission. All you really have to do is make sure you're the last house standing. And unlike with the mock battle in Chapter 1, the other 2 houses will actually fight each other. Of course, while sitting back and watching the houses fight is an option, it's advised to get involved in the battle if you want to optimize your experience gain. Not to mention that you get a reward if your class defeats the most enemies. Also, enemy houses will get stat buffs if they defeat enough enemies. It's not really an issue if you're ready to work around it, but it can still make things harder if you allow it to happen. As for how I handle this map, I chose to rush most of my units down the center towards the ballista. This allows me to minimize how much the other houses can attack each other. I did split Ingrid off from the main group so she could lure the enemy Pegasus Knights towards my units. And Sylvain is sent on a special mission to handle the Golden Deer's cavalry units, mostly due to his high movement as a cavalier himself. Of course, I also send Ashe with him to provide additional damage. I did get a moment of reprieve once I took the central hill. I could use this moment to heal and regroup my units while watching the girls have a slap fight. I'll hand Three Houses this. Having battles with multiple opposing armies allows for silly moments like this. Too bad only one of these battles exist, or 2 if you play on any non-Black Eagles path. I chose to finally interfere once Dorothea was low on health, seeing as that's a chance for free experience. With the girlies out of the way, it was then time to finally handle Claude and Edelgard. And man, I wonder how I did it. It's not like I have a unit with massive amounts of defense that turns anyone reliant on physical damage into an absolute joke. Seriously though, I only used Dedue to lure Claude. Since I decided to handle both house leaders at just about the same time, Edelgard got to have a taste of blood. She's still lost, though. It's okay, Queen. If I ever do another Three Houses challenge, I'll choose you. As for what we do next month, I haven't talked about paralogs yet, have I? Well, there's side stories, extra battles that give you more insight to the story or characters, provide you with extra items, or even provide you with characters to recruit. Now, I asked my friend if these were allowed, and his response was that I can do them if I can beat them. According to him, they were too difficult to beat, presumably because he was too low a level or something like that. Because I've been given the go-ahead to play paralogs, I've chosen to do to-dos. It's a very straightforward paralog to do, and gets me a good bit of experience to stay caught up in levels. This also means that to do gets to survive the time skip. I then follow this up with Ingrid's paralog. This is because the paralog provides me with Lune, another hero's relic that can be useful should the need ever arise. I also chose to do Sylvain's paralog. It's not really useful due to the fact that I already got the Lance of Ruin. However, it's still good for getting a small amount of experience. After watching nobody bat an eye at Dimitri's change in demeanor, it's time to deal with the Ramire Calamity. Now, you can finish this map pretty quickly by simply rushing Solon. However, doing so gets all the villagers killed, so I chose to take my time to save some of the villagers as a reward. Not all of them, though. I have to keep my allied body count up somehow. Also, rescuing all the villagers is stupidly annoying sometimes. Once the villagers are dealt with, it's then time to handle Solon. He's very weak to dying, especially when Lune's involved. Afterwards, the Flame Emperor talks to us and invites me to join them. I accept the offer, but the Flame Emperor calls me a liar before disappearing. Truly my favorite pointless choice in the game. Just let me vibe with the enemy for the sole purpose of chaos. Please! Doesn't matter though, as we move on. Of course, before doing any more story, we have some more paralogs to do. Most important of all is Manuela and Hanuman's paralog. Why? It gives you a free rapier, which is honestly the best sword in the game if you ask me. I then follow this up with Felix's paralog because why not? It's a fun moment to see how bad Holy Knights are. I guess I also get the Aegis shield, which can be neat. I think it's funny that the shield is gifted to you by the villagers, though. Clearly House Fraldarius has no actual control over their own hero's relic. Oh, and hey, I almost forgot, but we have the White Heron Cup this month. I had Flayn enter as she's a good dancer choice if you have no real plans for either her or the dancer class. And obviously she won with her 20-something charm. Speaking of dances, as we come upon the ball, I realized I never spoke to the gatekeeper this month, which means whoever I meet at the Goddess Tower will be whatever as support candidate I have the highest support with. And that turns out to be Mercedes. I sadly don't have any voiceover recorded from my sessions, but you should know I was in a VC and asked for bets on who it would be, and I actually called it being Mercedes just before she appeared. Okay, that's enough joy for Three Houses. We either need to find something controversial or kill someone, which means it's time for the chapel map. I will say that the demonic beasts here were semi-concerning for me. I wouldn't say that the map was particularly hard, but I just barely don't do enough damage to quickly delete the beasts like I usually would. This probably could be fixed were I to gain a few more levels to up my base damage, or if I gained more authority on my students so they could use better battalions. However, I can't do that as I don't have the ability to level grind with skirmishes, or to control student goals so they can easily gain more authority. I guess another potential worry of this map is Geralt dying because he is a defeat condition. However, you normally only worry about that if you're doing something like a solo run or just severely neglect dealing with the enemies. Not to mention that it's pretty easy to keep him alive if you top him off with healing magic. Anyways, once we successfully protect Geralt, we then get to watch him die. I love this cutscene because he gets to pay for his crimes against me. Also because I love a good body count. And, some guy really gives up after one attempt. Dude, I haven't used Divine Pulse at all. You have at least 2 more attempts at your disposal. I guess it's fine though, as we now get Depression Month. And you know what they say about depression? It's the perfect time to fish! We also take a moment to complete Seteth's paralog. Honestly, if you're playing Three Houses, I'd call this the one required paralogue to do. My reason is that you get some really powerful things from this map, namely the Caduceus Staff and the Keyhole Wyverns. The only real issue is that such an amazing battalion is obviously A rank, and I don't think I'll ever have someone reach A rank authority in this run. However, the Caduceus Staff can still be of great use, as I can hand it over to one of my mages to increase their attack range. With the power both Mercedes and Annette have been gaining, this is an invaluable item to equip on either of them. There are also other goodies we get this map, like the Spear of Assault, but again, it's unlikely I'll really be able to make use of some of these things. With the map completed, we then move on to our monthly mission, and I gotta say, I love this chapter. Mostly for our only real appearance of Kranya. Truly phenomenal voice work for a character who barely exists in this game. Actually, let's take a moment to appreciate her.
If this takes too long, I might be forced to escape. Oh, or do you simply intend to let me go? How accommodating of you. As for me, I intend to kill you all.
Okay, now she can die for stealing my kill. While it may turn out to be a trap, I view this as an opportunity to upgrade some guy and the Sword of the Creator, and also to watch my favorite cutscene in this game. However, this does give way to the harder part of this map where we have to deal with a magical commander. But the amount of magical damage you can do means nothing when Felix exists. Now, as we enter Chapter 11, this is actually where my friend softlocked himself. He simply could not beat the mission in the Holy Tomb. Since I was curious, I actually asked him to provide me with screenshots of his save file so I can compare how differently things went for us. Starting off with skill ranks, there were some major similarities between our highest ranking skills on characters, as I presume we both got very similar goal requests. However, there are a few outliers here, like with Dimitri, whose current goal for me was to work towards being a paladin. However, for my friend, Dimitri was still under the goal to improve at being a lord. Another interesting difference is my Felix actually has levels in black magic because he requested the Mortal Savant goal, and probably one I find most interesting is that my Ashe actually has a lower bow rank because he ended up requesting the Wyvern Rider goal. This didn't particularly mess with me though, as he succeeded his Sniper certification and the Wyvern Rider certification, allowing me to choose whatever class I deemed necessary for a map. Ingrid was also hit with the same issues as Dimitri, where she never switched off of her Pegasus Knight goal to her Paladin goal for my friend. As such, she has a much lower riding rank in his game than mine. There are some other notably weird differences between our ranks though, unrelated to goals. From what I can see, my friend put in work to instruct students on seemingly random skills. These don't go beyond rank D or C, which makes it very strange to look at. Like, why does Annette have D rank in axes when those lessons could be better used towards improving her faith ranks? And no, it's not just skills that students have as boons, because why does Felix have D rank in armor? If you say it's about having weight -3, please consider the fact that this was my friend's first casual playthrough of the game. I don't think he had that goal. The other major difference between our games is that he recruited a lot of units. His total roster size was 22 characters including Byleth. That means he recruited a total of 12 optional characters. Meanwhile, I only recruited Manuela and Catherine at this point. Manuela for her paralogue and Catherine because Thunderbrand is broken. And it's looking at all these characters where I can see what the major problem with this file is. See, every single character is below level 20. The only people above level 20 are Byleth and anyone who seems to have been recruited this month in the game. Dimitri is level 17. He should not be level 17 at this point in the game. This is compared to my units all being around level 20 to 22. Now, there are two possible causes for this level discrepancy. The first being that my friend only did the story battles. There's no extra experience gained from paralogs or quest battles or obviously skirmishes. However, I don't think this is the sole cause of my friend's low levels. I think he tried to evenly level every single character in his class. How do I know this? He has extra experience on various recruited units like Caspar or Lysithea, and I even asked about this, to which he told me he played the game like Pokemon, and suddenly, everything made sense. See, the real issue with this file is Byleth. First of all, his professor level is at C+, mine is at A, and looking at the motivation levels of his students, I'm betting that's because he didn't use the meals mechanic, or at least he didn't use it enough. The next thing I want you to do is look at this spread of Byleth's skills and spot the issue. I don't see a single B rank skill here. The only way I can describe what's going on with these skills is that my friend tried to recruit every single character in his first playthrough. Now, there's nothing wrong with wanting to recruit everyone, but that's not really viable in Three Houses. First of all, the game's basically built around you having 10 or so units. Secondly, with the various recruitment requirements, you're not really supposed to recruit everyone until you're on New Game Plus, where it's easier to up your friendships and skill ranks. Of course, it's still possible to recruit everyone on a fresh file, but doing so can be very difficult without planning in advance, or without properly making use of the monastery. My friend truly tried to catch them all, but that is very much opposite to the point of Three Houses. Also, I just noticed while writing this, why does my friend have 31 charm? I only have 19, and that's with an equipped item. Did he obsessively do tea time a bunch in the monastery? This is a question for my friend. I know you're going to watch this video. Why is your charm so high? What were you doing in the monastery? Anyway, with that crisis out of the way, let's beat the game in my friend's place. The Holy Tomb isn't too difficult to map, mostly because my units are all in advanced classes, but also because a large portion of the enemy will ignore you as they find picking up the crest stones more interesting. My assumption is that my friend found this map difficult because he wanted to keep all his units alive while also stopping the enemy from stealing a single crest stone. I found that the safest way to do this would be through properly splitting up my team. One set of units would take the left half of the map, while another set would take the right. Meanwhile, I had Sylvain and Dedue distract the enemy in the center of the map. I chose Dedue for obvious reasons, while Sylvain is also here for being a decent tank. I never mentioned this, but I actually put in the instructional effort to make Sylvain a hero. I don't know of anyone who considers the hero a good or useful class in this game, but maybe it's a niche just for me. Anyways, I chose to give Sylvain the hero class to allow for balanced defensive and offensive stats, all while not suffering the speed penalty incurred by being a cavalry unit. Of course, he still needs some assistance from some guy, but it's just enough to hold off the enemies so they don't attack Felix's group. Once I'd cleared the central area, I was then able to rush the Flame Emperor, or really the Flame Emperor rushed me, and died because of it, and y'all will never know how unhinged I was during this moment. Only a select few people know my crimes. With the Flame Emperor defeated, we learn that they've been Edelgard all along, and Dimitri does his best impression of me during any live stream. We then get a bunch of random useless stuff for protecting all the crest stones before entering our final chapter before the time skip. Now, because I knew at this point that my friend recruited a bunch of characters, I brought a new challenge upon myself. How many units can I recruit in this singular month, despite having zero setup to recruit these units? Well, since I'm level 24, I can easily recruit all the church units for free, and Sedith is also automatically recruited this month. I'm also easily able to recruit Lindhart, Caspar, and Ignatz this month thanks to the skills I've focused on improving. However, it's not just skills that matter when it comes to recruiting units. You can make it easier to recruit people if your friendship with them is high enough. It's pretty easy to raise friendship, whether through meals, giving lost items, or even giving gifts. So long as they like you more, their standards will be lower. With some improvements to our friendship, we were easily able to then recruit Lysithea, Dorothea, Lorenz, Raphael, and Marianne. With this, I was able to increase the number of units I had up to 25. Was it worth it? Probably not. But hey, I get to save them in the time skip. Now that we've saved everyone we can, it's time to go to war. This map honestly isn't too bad. You're free to go all out with your combat arts and weapon usage this map, as any equipped weapons will have their durability restored after the time skip, which means it's time to go all out with the hero's relics I collected. I still chose to take this map carefully though, as I took out the enemies in the eastern and western strongholds. As I took my time, Randolph decided to go on an adventure. He managed to get decently far before Felix deleted him from existence, which was then followed by Mercedes nuking Edelgard. With the battle won, we end up falling off a cliff and dying. The end. That's it. That's the end of the challenge run. If you thought we would play through the second half of the game, you made the wrong assumption. See, there was one final rule of this run. To play like my friend means to stop playing once you hit the time skip, because he hates the time skip. Goodbye. Oh, you're still here. Hello. Why are you still watching? I'm just tanking my analytics now with this part of the video. It's a joke. You're only gonna see fishing. Or did you forget what day today is? Though, maybe we can make this fun. I want you to go into the comments and make something up about this video. Just lie to people so they're confused about whatever this whole thing is. Maybe even make something up about the second half of the game. However, if you're not very good at lying, then just answer this question. Who in Three Houses would have a fursuit? Like, unironically, they are a furry. Or they just have a fursuit for some reason. I personally am willing to bet on Felix having a wolf fursuit. You know what? Sure. If you're still gonna be here, I'll give you another question. Who's in the Garreg Nightmare Blunt rotation? In relation to that last question, what about the Nightmare Tea Time rotation? Don't give me your simple, here's Ferdy, Lorenz, and Constance. I want the Nightmare Tea Time rotation. Yeah, so I know this channel loves Yuri, or at the very least, you guys tolerate my gay ass. So what's your favorite Fire Emblem, Yuri? Okay, here's my favorite question. Which characters in Three Houses would mess up a backflip, and how badly would they wipe? Oh, yeah. I guess I didn't come up with a conclusion for this challenge. No wonder why you're still watching. The answer is no. I mean, you can win with the rules he gave me, but I still didn't exactly play like my friend. Consider this a warning to give me in-depth rules if you want me to do things a certain way.